Okay, I thought I'd do a showcase of how the game looks like. Currently it's a version 1.3, which you could see in the corner earlier. This is what the main screen of the game looks like. You have the info at the bottom of what you're actually looking at, which is the aluminium mine. All your resources, money, day, menu, all the sell rates, the staff screen, and the market screen. You can see the price for every single resource. It goes as time goes on, and at the end of every hour it creates a new market. So as you can see, aluminium is doing very well, but it's probably going to start going down after this. Oh no, it kept going up. Then as you'll be able to see in a second, yep, going down. And the price reflects that. So that is where the strategy element of this comes in, or part of it. You have to watch the markets to see when you want to sell and when you want to keep what you have. And the more you sell, this market bias, as you see here, will go down. That's a multiplier applied to what the price of each ore is. And each one has its own market bias. So as you sell more aluminium, its price will go down, and the price of other ores will go up. And that goes for all of the ores. Also have the staff screen. You can purchase managers, which will automatically sell your ore for you, and you have the special staff. And you have all the info on the actual mines that you're dealing with. I can click on this, it'll advance all of the mines, even though I only have one right now. So as you see, when it goes from harvesting done, collecting active idle, got one more aluminium. Goes for a bit, even though the price is going down, I'll sell. Get two more mines. And now I'm getting even more because all of them are being updated when I click on this. Okay, skipping forward a bit. I waited until the price of aluminium went up, I sold, and now I have more money. I can now hire a miner. So now this one mine specifically, the others are still by themselves. This one is now being harvested automatically, and the miner can provide bonuses based on its level and if it's there at all. So now this one is harvesting automatically, that is reflected up there. I can also hire another one because I have the money. So now I'm getting nearly an average of 1 aluminium per second. And that is effectively the game. You just then, as over time, as you get more money, more resources, you then start investing into things like copper, iron, zinc, which are worth even more, until eventually you're getting platinum mines, which cost a lot. Like that, just to get your first one is 43, and it increases by 3 times each one. But you'll spend quite a bit of time down in the simple mines of aluminium, copper, iron, zinc, and having to constantly sell, try to get as much money. Eventually you start getting to automate the selling process with your managers, as you can set. If I actually go and get one, I can afford one now. Wrong screen. As you can see, for aluminium I can set when this manager will sell it, the minimum amount they can sell, and the maximum amount they can sell, enable them. And they have a short cooldown so that they don't sell it all at once. So now, if the price of aluminium goes over 0.7 and I have at least 100, it will then sell aluminium. And that is effectively the game. Hey, I'm NatZombieGames, and this is a devlog of how I made the game mining idle in 48-ish hours using Godot. Now, I want to be clear, by 48 hours, I mean 48 hours of development time, not 2 days. I got the 48-ish hours of work done across 13 days, and if I can be bothered, then there'll be a little day counter on screen as we go through the progress of development. Anyway, on to day 1. Now, I didn't start with any planning, I just jumped straight into working on the main menu, which was very much a placeholder for now, just being a solid colour background to the most basic buttons. Then I made a loading screen scene, which allowed for the transition into the game. In this version, the plan was to just have a long list of mines in a row, and you would slowly buy them as you progressed, but as you could see in the showcase, I ended up ditching the system halfway through development. This is also when I made most of the UI for the game, with the money and resources being in the top left, and selling resources being in the top right. This is also when I made another crucial part of the game, the price of resources changing as you sell items. So currently the prices were constant except for you selling, which would soon be changed. On day 2, I did a lot of tweaking of how the prices should change, trying to find a balance of not crashing the prices instantly whilst also making it impactful. Now, I never ended up finding a good balance, as even in the current version you can break the economy if you try hard enough, but I tried to balance it. After that I got to working on the miners, who could be bought to work on each mine, automating the collection process and giving some bonuses to the collection process. And if a mine has a miner, that gives them an RPS, being resources per second, and I made counters below the amount of the given resource for how many you get per second. I also made a function to humanize a number, by that I mean make it more readable by putting commas after every third number. This broke a large number of times due to negative numbers and floats and generally bad coding. It was mostly working after a while of tinkering. This is also when I learned about the curve object in Godot, which allows you to make curves with predefined points, which I wanted to use to give each resource its own stock market, which could be generated at the end of each hour, so that's what I plan to make tomorrow. The next day I got a time cycle working, with a minute in game being 1 second in real life. As I would store the time as a vector too, which was one thing I learned during this project. Vectors are useful for storing related data without them being separate variables or an array. I also use vectors for the transaction and resource queue systems for a similar reason, but I'll cover those tomorrow. For now I was getting work on the market manager done, which was the script handling all the market graph creation. I got it mostly working before moving on to making a screen in the UI to display the graphs. This took nearly all of that day's work to do, part of that being that the graph was upside down for some reason, which took longer to fix than it should have. For this I had to make my own algorithm, using line2ds and normalizing lists. Though looking at the resulting code, it is a lot less complicated than it felt making it. So now you can see the markets for each resource. At the time you could see the progress line and where the price would be in the future, but I changed it so you could only see up to where the price was at that time. And to adapt the system of selling and reducing the price of an ore, I added sell biases, being a multiplier added to both ends of a given resource's price range. So as you sell something, its sell bias should get smaller and the sell biases of other resources should increase. So when I first made the system, when selling, the price of a sold resource would actually increase, which wasn't ideal, but luckily was an easy fix. On day 4, after fixing the sell biases, I went and changed the money to be handled in a queue. I did this in a similar fashion to how I'd been handling resources this entire time. Instead of other scenes directly changing the value for either a resource quantity or the money counter, they append vector 2 into a queue to be handled every frame. For the resources, the first item in the vector is the resource number, and the second is the quantity, and for money the first item is what is being sold, the number for each resource, or -1 for other money transactions, and the second one being the quantity. Every frame we take a snapshot of the queue and process it before removing all the items in the snapshot from the queue. The reason I made these use queues opposed to changing the values directly was to avoid collisions. Basically when two separate systems try to access a number at the same time, which can result in lost data. For example, two mines try to increase the amount of gold, let's say, by 1. We have 10 gold, so mine 1 reads the number 10, increases it to 11, and during this process, mine 2 also wants to increase gold by 1, so it goes, reads 10, then mine 1 puts its number back into the counter, mine 2 increments its red number to 11 and puts it back into the counter. Now we've lost 1 gold. Now that may seem unlikely with just 2 mines, but imagine we have tens, if not hundreds of mines all running at once. That could be a lot of lost money or resources. Anyway, after that is also when I made them managers, the person you could hire for every resource type which would automatically sell your resources when the price exceeds a given minimum amount. I also created some more mines, which is when I realised the game would be not only a lot better, but also have a lot more content if I made the mines procedural. So you could just hit a button and a new mine would be generated, which could have its own miner and stats, opposed to me manually making each mine. But I knew this would be a big change, so I decided I would sleep on it that night and in the meantime work on another feature, special staff. Being people you could only hire one of and who would provide special buffs or features. Starting with the financer, who gave you daily finance reports on how much you sold and how much money you are making and spending every day. For day 5, I started by fixing the financer and the finance screen, and making the new system for the mines. Now there are what I call mine clusters for each resource, which holds all the smaller mines. But this means redoing nearly all of the mining code, the center point of the game about mining, which was awfully rich of me to think I could manage that with the fact I ended this day with only a little over 2 hours left, as I started this as a 24-hour challenge before extending it to 48 hours. On day 6, I got to making the new info panel, being what displays all the information about the current mine you are on. In the process, making a line of code over 2,000 characters long, which held all the values to set in the info panel. So after some work, I got the info panel working, then fixed all the numerous bugs with the allegedly fixed info panel. Part of the info panel was the button to discover new mines, which wasn't hard to make, but then my work was cut short as I forgot I had plans that day, so I ended up getting nearly no work done. So tomorrow would be the final day. Fuck, I can't finish it. Oh god, oh no, well... Yeah, on day 7 I realised I was way in over my head, and next to no time to make a majority of the game. Remember at this point the main menu was a solid colour background with some buttons, there was no saving, couldn't even automate your mining, and the whole game was a sneeze away from imploding. So I got to working on the new miners, at the same time a lot of bug fixing and applying duct tape to the mess which was the code. I'm not helped by buttons randomly unbinding themselves from their signals, which ended up happening a lot during this project. So many times I'd be testing something and an entirely unrelated button, which I hadn't touched in days, just unbound itself for the fun of it. I then realised as it worked that I couldn't even dream of finishing this project in the given time, and extended this to be a 48-hour project, and then stopped working for that day to try and get a better start the next day. I started day 8 by fixing a lot of bugs I caused from hastily trying to throw the miner code together the day prior, in the process getting a new personal record of 122,537 runtime errors, which nearly crashed Godot, there were so many. I don't know why I got these errors. I made a post on the forums and was redirected to the source files of Godot, but I can't read C++, so I was completely lost. They were all remote debugger errors, seemingly to do with passing my code and getting stuck on some small section as part of the error, or something being less than 4 characters long, which I didn't like. But since it not only never happened again, but also didn't seem to affect the game in any way, I just kind of moved on. If one of you watching this knows C++ and could find out what the hell could have happened there, then I would love to know what made the editor fall over itself as much as it did. I'll have the Godot forum post I made about it hopefully linked in the description. Anyway, after moving on from that, I got to making the new main menu, also working on getting saves working for the game. As part of making the main menu, I, according to my notes, get to the buttons to do fun movie shit. So now the buttons do this. Revolutionary, I know. Using these new movie buttons, I added one to bring up the menu to pick the save file to use, and if this is left blank, a new game is started. I start day 9 by getting the menu in-game to work, allowing you to save, quit, and view the new guide I added, which explains some of the basics of how the game works, since I realised it may be a bit confusing just throwing people into the game with no information on how the game works. I also added the ability to see the guide on the main menu. This is also when I noticed that the parallax clouds I added the day prior were broken again, so I go to fix those. And yes, this is the main background. I know it looks real fugly, but it's as good as I can make it realistically. There is a reason I'm more of a programmer over an artist. Anyway, I got back to making the save files. The plan was to, at runtime, just set all of the values for the nodes using the save manager, so if no save was loaded, they would proceed using the default values, therefore starting a new game. This worked great, except that I was using config files, which don't like to store objects, which means I couldn't save the curves for the markets or the timers on the mines. I asked about this on the forums before stopping work for that day. Thanks to Wyatt Biker on the forums, who directed me to using resources to save my data over config files. So now in day 10 I was able to get the saving the curves working, as they saved the curves as a sub-resource instead of trying to save them as plain text. So this didn't work for the scene tree timers. After a lot of faff trying to get it to work, I ended up just not saving the timers and we recreate them at load time, which does mean you lose the progress you had, but most of the time that'll be a handful of seconds at most, so it isn't that bad. And during the writing of the loading functions, I had a lot of fun with typed arrays. If you don't know, in Godot, you can declare the type of the contents for a given array, which helps with performance and debugging. But annoyingly, when loading data from a stored file, it is saved and therefore read as just an array, not a typed one. So when trying to set variable values, it'll either not set or crash depending on how you do it. So I had to make a bunch of these dirty functions to type the arrays. Please, Godot, either let us save and load using typed arrays, or make types as a passable argument so I can make just one function to retype an array, I beg. But after all that, I thought I had all the saving and loading working. I think I forgot something. If you forgot, then it wasn't important. Yeah, you're right. Yep, one of the most critical parts of the game, the miners, in a game about mining, completely slipped my mind. I started this day by rewriting the code of assigning miners to mines again, which is already I think the 3rd time I did this, as it just kept breaking, but now that I was loading saved data, it just imploded in on itself. Alongside this was a lot of other bug fixing and changes. But also some new features, like adding the second special staff member, the foreman, which makes all future miners be hired at level 1 instead of level 0. I made the intro and credit sequences alongside the icon, which was just a basic M. Also made a sprite for the mine clusters by following a tutorial by the Kenser on Twitter, which popped up as I was looking for a free asset to use for the mine clusters. So I ended up making this rock sprite for them instead of a solid brown square I had before, which was one of the better drawings I've made. And that was it for the first release of Mining Idle. Then it was time to post it up on Itch and show it to people. So I released the game, and immediately it was not only broken, but poorly balanced, as someone was able to get the price of aluminium down to nearly nothing, and platinum to over $1,000 per piece. And miners didn't unassign themselves from mines, so you can move to the same one to all of your mines. Also the UI was a bit shit, which didn't help. So I went to make 1.1 that evening, which fixed the miner assignment issue and increased the times to harvest resources to balance things a bit, as it was easy to maximise the timers to harvest things so fast you could have one mine produce hundreds of ore per second. So on day 12, to finish off the project, I made a scene to allow for easy tabs to replace the UI before in the market and staff screens. Instead of having your current page and buttons to increment and decrement the page by one, you now have a list of the pages to select from. And I redid how the list of miners worked, as before it was just one long list of miners, which was annoying to use. Now it is one long list on the left with just their names, and on the right is the info of the selected miner. And a lot of bug fixing ensued because these miners just loved constantly causing trouble for me during the development of this project. Turns out in fact I wasn't done with this. Not only did the miners still not work, but you couldn't even leave the staff screen as it would crash when you tried to close it on the miners page. So for the current version of 1.3, I entirely redid the miner system. Opposed to them being their own thing, I went back to how I did them at the start of this with all the mines in a row. So now each miner is unique and stuck on their own mine, which not only saved a page in the start screen, but also fixed the clusterfuck of code and all the issues with the old system. That did take a decent bit of work under the hood, which is why I'm saying this took 48-ish hours, as this probably would have taken it, I'm guessing, to around 50 hours. But that should be it in a functional state at long last. That about does it for the development of Mining Idle. The game isn't perfect, especially when it comes to the economy, as you can still fairly easily make it go all over the place, but for the fact that it is my second ever proper release game, which is made in around 48 hours, I am happy with it. While making this, I got to make good use of lambda functions, which if you don't know is a useful thing in Godot and some other languages which, in layman's terms, allow you to pass a function as an argument. And in Godot you can write short one-line functions and even use semicolons to separate where a new line should be, saving making a bunch of small one-time functions in your code. I use these on multiple things. A lot of the buttons in the UI are given their functionality using lambdas. For example, the staff purchase button isn't connected to anything at the start, but as part of the create UI function, we connect this press signal to the lambda. If money is greater than or equal to X, we call another function. We then bind the cost of a manager to this function, and similar things like this are all over the code. This saves having a bunch of tiny functions all over the place. So despite all the troubles that this game gave me whilst making it, it was a fun experience overall, and I think it would be good to remake this or a sequel in the future when my skills improve. As I feel if I get better at game design and development as a whole, I could take this idea a lot further, but that's far in the future. For now, I'm going to move on to my next game, which I'm currently thinking of doing a game set in a zombie apocalypse, since I've been watching The Walking Dead recently, so now zombies have infected all of my creative ideas. So to scratch that itch, I think my next game will be focused on zombies in one way or another. If you'd like to play the game, then you can download version 1.3, which is the version as I make this video, on my itch page, which should be in the description. Anyway, that is about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I don't have an outro. I think I forgot something. If you forgot, then it wasn't important. Yeah, you're right.